Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to do a channel-specific video specifically to define a word. So I like to do new word definitions, and the reason why is the the way I do my channel is I use freighted words, words that have a lot of meaning, and when I say them, a good example would be baptism. When you say baptism, is that baptism of fire, baptism of water? Is that sprinkling? Is that immersion? And every single word that I just said connected to that word is freighted, right? Freighted, like you open the box um, with a crowbar, or freighted, right? So I want to be able to use this word going forward, but I don't want to have to define it every single time. So I can just, people can look it up here, right? Okay, all right. So I'm going to define the word obvioration. 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 Spelling above in the title. All right. What is obvioration? Well, I'll give you an example from the past, and then I'll give you a very recent example, right, from the 2024 U.S. presidential election. So obvioration, okay, is researching, examining, and exploring the obvious, right? And our culture does it all the time now, right? We're like, hey, everybody, get out your protractors and let's examine and explore and research this bizarre phenomenon to tell the truth, to find the truth, right? So let me give you an example of this. Obviorating occurred around the Liver King, okay? So the Liver King is a guy, he was right here on YouTube, right? And he was on a bunch of social medias. And he was absolutely jacked in ways you had never seen before, right? Like he had muscles on muscles on muscles. And because, of the shape of social media, because he looked like, a guy who could, throw Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson 10 feet, right? Everybody was like, oh my gosh, let's listen to what this guy has to say, because he looks like a human Goliath, right? Like, he looks like a modern day Goliath, right? Like, he was just massive, right? Now, before there was a scandal with the Liver King, people were like, hey, I think the Liver King is taking steroids. And I was like, wait, is that a debate? Right? And they were like, well, of course it's a debate. He has said on his channel that all this muscle mass he has is from eating liver. And I'm like, wait, what? And then they were like, yeah, he just eats liver. He eats raw liver, right? And then he has these exercises and he turns it into pure body mass. And I was like, are you guys joking? This guy is clearly drinking steroid shakes in the morning for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This guy is two things. He's a skeleton and a pile of steroids. He's taking steroids. Is this a joke? Right? Like, it was like watching a man standing in a lake and saying, hey, everybody, I'm dry. And you're like, you're standing in a lake. What are you talking about? Right? And so, like, and then later, the Liver King came out and said, sorry, everybody, I've been doing steroids. And I was like, you didn't have to tell anybody that. Everybody knew. Is this a joke? Or are you like, this is obvious? But there were people who were like, going on and putting up charts and like, doing numbers and saying, here's my observations, and observations, examinations, explorations, and research on the plainly obvious, right? Like, and where does this come into, so let's talk about American politics, right? Kamala Harris. So, like, a month before Joe Biden drops out, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Joe Biden is a terrible candidate. He's almost 80, he's over 80 years old. His senescence and decay are outrageously obvious to anybody who looks. I just listened to a woman, and Brianna Wu over on Trigonometry. She said, we spent 4 years pretending he wasn't senile. That's a lot of gaslighting. That is a lot of the Democrats gaslighted people for 4 years. And we had this conversation of whether he was senile or not. Brianna Wu was like, we pretended for she was talking about the Democrat Party. We pretended for 4 years he wasn't senile. That's astounding. That's an astonishing statement, right? So he was terrible. He was a terrible, terrible candidate, right? But the reason they weren't going to drop him, right, before George Clooney said, hey, drop it, and then Nancy Pelosi did his bidding, right? The reason all this happened, right, was, and this is, it was openly known. It was discussed openly on every podcast. Everybody's like, yeah, Biden is an abominable candidate. He's almost a Sherlock lose, right? But we're jammed up because Kamala is worse. For 4 years, her numbers have been worse. We're all shocked. We don't understand how a woman who can listen to questions and then answer questions with corresponding words and concepts could possibly have worse numbers than Biden, but she does. It was not a secret. It was openly discussed on the most left podcast routinely that Kamala was a worse candidate than Biden. This was openly discussed for all 4 years of the years that Biden supposedly was president, from 2020 to 2024, right? This was obvious. Right? And then suddenly, right, she becomes a candidate, and suddenly we're in obvioration. Oh, we need to examine if her numbers are higher than Biden's. Surprisingly, shockingly, they are. How did that happen? Well, you wrote them on the paper. You didn't do any numbers. You never were creating any numbers. You just wrote down numbers you liked, right? Like it was obvioration. It was obvious that Kamala would lose literally the day she was chosen to replace Biden. You just had to use the openly common knowledge that for 4 years her numbers had always been worse than Biden's, right? And so we have to stop this. This is something we need to stop. We need to stop obvioration. We need to stop examining, exploring, researching, observing if the obvious is true, right? And how do we do that? Well, first of all, we define it, and I've done that. Obvioration. We need to stop obviating, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.